Ready.
Okay.
Here we go.
Here we go. Yes. What are we this time, Brandon?
We're live.
We're live.
We're
Okay.
live.
11.
No, it isn't actually.
It's not.
I realized that as I was publishing the last episodes. Every episode we said the wrong number multiple times.
That is
Perfect.
true.
So we're just going to agree to not say what episode number
Okay.
this is.
That makes sense.
This episode, welcome.
This is the last one before the live one. We'll say that.
There you go.
Yes.
We can go with that.
Which may or may not be broken into two parts depending on how long we talk.
There you go.
We agreed to that. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Which, by the way, so September 8th.
Yes.
The idea is from, was it
Museum.
6 to 8 at the Museums of Hopkinsville?
Yeah. What day of the
downtown.
week is that?
That's a Friday.
That's a Friday night.
Yes. So come on out. Museum will be open, and we're going to be recording our last one. We're going to talk about the epilogue and just the whole thing.
It'll
too.
be educational.
Yes.
Yeah.
And entertaining.
Could kids get credit for this from their school?
That's between them and their teachers.
Yeah,
Probably
so
not,
maybe.
because we're probably too woke for proper credit.
I'm not woke.
I refuse to be.
I think
labeled.
I'm the most conservative person up here.
I don't know if any of that's true at all.
You're actually probably right. Honestly,
Yeah,
Richard,
I don't
you
know.
probably are.
I
You
don't
think
know.
so? I think so.
How do you define conservative? Because I swear anarchy is the most conservative of all governments.
Well, libertarianism is. And there is a libertarian on this stage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm registered libertarian myself.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay. Can we talk about stuff like that?
I don't know. I mean, we just did.
That's not wise.
That's another
is it?
podcast. That's another
That is.
podcast.
Yeah.
We just
As
did.
This
pastors,
podcast is probably
I'm
not
for
the one for
Jesus.
Yes.
I vote for Pedro and Jesus.
Well, see, I've only ever voted for Jesus. Every election, I've always written in Jesus.
You wrote in Jesus?
Yes, every time.
Local elections, I vote in myself if I don't know who it is.
I did that once because I realized I could do that.
Yeah.
Never thought about that.
Yeah, if I don't know who the person is, I always vote in myself.
How about that? Okay, we got to get to the book, but
Yeah.
how about this as a pact? Then from now on, when there's 3 spots, we can just put each other's names in.
You know
all
what?
3 of us every time.
I
and see what
almost
happens.
became road supervisor in Clarksville. I had a lot of people say they were going to vote for me because no one was, on the list registered. But then they said that I had to declare myself as a write-in candidate before the election for my write-in
man.
votes to count.
You know what?
You got-
I will
you
defend
almost
him on
got
that.
it.
I will defend him on that because the roads in Clarksville are so like the
Yeah.
getting off and the traffic. Like I would want somebody who's approved,
Yeah.
and not just somebody I wrote.
Yeah,
in.
you don't want me. Yeah.
Probably not. You just were talking about how much you don't care.
I don't care about roads.
All right, so we're in chapter 6 in the book.
Yay.
Yeah.
Book been coming through some hard times. Remember, there's a camera.
Yes. Camera. Hi, everybody.
Hello, cameraman.
So if you haven't gotten the book, you should get it and read it. We had somebody who stopped in when we were talking, you missed it in Panera, and they were saying how they liked what we're doing with the podcast because
Yeah.
it's so wonderful. And then they were reading the book and they're like, it's so hard to read.
They said it's like a textbook.
They're like, reading the book's not like listening to you guys.
Yeah.
And I took that as a compliment because that's kind of what we're doing is to try and make the material a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, palatable.
Because for some people, it is an academic textbook. This is an anthropology textbook on Hopkinsville.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think too that our goal is talking about this as pastors. We're approaching it from a different perspective than Glazier is.
Exactly.
And so this is a springboard.
Yes.
Right. It is a springboard. We are not covering the book in depth. It is sparking concepts, sparking ideas that we then talk about from a pastoral perspective. So, if you think that listening to us is the same as reading the book, it is not.
No.
I still commend reading the book.
Yes.
I do too.
I would say that is the best way to engage with this material is to go to the source.
Yes, exactly. And if you come out on Friday when we're at the museums, going to the museum, if you're here in town, the museum
buy
is a
it.
great place
Yeah.
to go and see this material and to just, you can see her journal.
That's right.
Yeah. Miss Ellen.
Miss
Yeah.
Wallace. Miss
Yeah.
Wallace.
Pay tribute to Miss Ellen. And you can buy a copy of the book, or I would sell
When they have it
mine.
in stock because it's so hard to keep in stock.
There, exactly.
I'm not selling my copy.
You know,
First of all, my
you
wife's
could,
not
we
done
could
reading
sign it, and then we could auction it off.
No, I'm keeping it. This is mine.
There we get like a whole $5.
And you could with all your sticky notes in it.
If you see my pot, I just lost another one. See,
I love this
Every time you
because
mock a
this-
sticky note, one dies.
but look, I've got the graveyard right next to me over here.
The sticky note graveyard from Kumar's book.
But he's got extras, folks. It's
see,
not like he's running
And don't
out.
you love how cute they are?
So what are we talking
little
about?
lambs.
Moving on.
yeah.
So, civil rights and beyond.
I love this.
Opening sentence.
Yeah.
The civil rights era created the cultural conditions under which memories divided by race would inevitably collide. All right, so again, bias assumptions about inevitable collision, which I don't think he was wrong, but divide. All right, so we talked about this before about me from California, Idaho, Tennessee. We kind of lived this out. Like, it is true that there is a divided opinion and divided memory on the past, on what actually happened. That kind of affects us.
Yeah. I mean, there's a divided opinion on how we see the past, definitely.
Yeah.
We talked, I think, previously about how the Civil War was taught, or how we grew up, how history was taught and what was focused and what was not focused on. We were talking about just now about how our children are educated and the documents that they are presented and the particular take that those on those documents. And so I think for any parent, it's up to them to help to what they consider fill the gaps for whether it's private education, public education, or homeschooled education, that they need to be one of the last words on what their kids are influenced by educationally.
Yes.
That doesn't always happen, but it's just like we can't trust a youth group or a church to be the sole place where you get your Christian education. You need to read it yourself. You need to discuss with others to be able to get a full grasp of maybe what the Word is saying or what the Word is saying to you. So in the same way, I think history is a lot of the same way, especially when it comes to education.
That's actually a thing that I wanted to, not entirely agreeing with you. Like, yes, parents should be involved in their kids' education, but when I was a public educator, I will say too, one of the obstacles that teachers face is that, all right, you are the parent, yes, but if you're not going to take the time to even know the material yourself, and then you come along and you say, I'm going to teach the kid what's right, and it's like, but you don't even know. Right. I mean, and history is a great example of that. I mean, it's easy to be ignorant of any subject. I mean, math is even, some come in and say, hey, you're teaching math all wrong. People will complain about the new math. It's like, okay, well, can you do algebra? No. Then how can you tell me that the way they're doing it now is wrong? Oh, I mean, I don't like the new math, but I can actually do math too. I mean, I can do all that stuff. So that's the flip side is, yes, parents be involved, but parents first educate yourself, then get involved.
That's a great point, because people will say, I don't like the way they're teaching history now. Well, do you know what history is? No. Go back and educate yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Because that is part of, I think, what drives it is that they're like, I don't like what they're saying, but I don't have an alternative to offer other than my ignorance.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that one of the things, and this is obviously coming from my biased perspective as a home educating parent, I think that parents misunderstand. They think that they have to be an expert in every subject if they're going to educate their children at home, or correct what's happening in the public school. And so they just kind of throw their hands up because they're like, I can't be an expert. The cool thing about education is you only have to be one day ahead of whoever you're teaching.
That's great.
Oh, I know that.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, you only have to be one day ahead.
That's right.
It just takes effort.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that, in large part, a failure of the church in discipleship has been encouraging parents to put that effort in, whether they homeschool, whether their kids go to private school, or whether their kids are in public school. The parent should not delegate the educational task to the teacher, right? To the public school or the private school, or even to the homeschool.
Yeah.
Like, my wife does most of the instruction in my home. That doesn't mean I'm still not responsible for my kids' education.
Yeah.
It just takes a little different approach with each of those. But the parent, I think, to back you up, is supposed to be the educational authority.
Yeah.
But you have to put the effort in.
Yeah.
And I think that's really crucial what we're talking about, because we're talking about the mid 1950s, 1960s, and beyond. Yeah. And I think all of that is relevant here in Hopkinsville because of the things that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be talking about that. And it kicks off talking about, a lot of, it talks about housing, talks about education.
Let's go to 192. Let's start out with desegregation and integration of the schools. We got an extended quote from Bell Hooks.
I love that you're starting off with this. And people don't know who Bell Hooks is. Okay, go. No. Do you want to go, Brandon? Have you read?
No, I'm out of this. Y'all can
Did you read Bone Black?
No.
So I've not done. I'm on a second. I'm listening to a second book of hers, which she did with Cornel West.
Oh, okay.
Where they're literally just talking back and forth about what is it to be a black intellectual in this world.
Wow.
Which, interestingly enough, if anybody out there listening was not a huge fan of, say, President Obama's policies, they spent like about the first 10 minutes or so in that book, like just bad mouthing how much they never liked him. And I'm like, what? Wow, I didn't realize you guys disliked him so much.
There are,
but it was just
there are black people that don't like Obama.
But what it is that it was showing, like, again, they're from, so give people this context. Bell Hooks comes from this tradition of I am going to think my own thoughts.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine.
Right.
Exactly. And she's from Hoptown. She's a Hopkinsville native. She's world renowned. I mean, black feminist writer. She recently passed away. But
there's a mural over downtown.
Yes, there is. We just saw it the other day. And there's an institute in Berea. She has an institute in Berea for passing on her legacy and all that. But she was a citizen of Hopkinsville when they were integrating the schools.
Yeah. Bone Black talks about it. And I think this passage is from Bone Black.
Okay. Well, I say that too about her and Cornel West, talking bad about Obama and Clinton and Bush and everybody, actually. But I say that to say that what you're going to hear here is different than what a lot of people hear as far as a black narrative of desegregation.
That's right.
And that's what's great about reading her, but also unique about reading her, is that this is her opinion. It's not this is universal, but this is a good look at what it felt like to be a native of Hopkinsville when they integrated the schools.
Right.
And so she said, we cannot believe we must leave our beloved Crispus Attucks and go to schools in white neighborhoods. We cannot imagine what it will be like to walk by the principal's office and see a man who will not know our name, who will not care about us. Already the grown-ups are saying it will be nothing but trouble, but they do not protest. We start by leaving behind the pleasure we feel in going to our all-black school and seeing friends and being a part of a school community. Our pleasure is replaced by fear. We no longer like attending school. We are tired of the long hours spent discussing what can be done to make integration work. We discuss with them knowing all the while that they want us to do something, to change, to make ourselves into carbon copies of them so that they can forget what we are here, so that they can forget the injustice of their past. They are not prepared to change. She's saying we don't want it. Which, I mean, we've been engaged in these conversations with my kids too about the difference between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Malcolm X was all for segregation. He's like, you're just not doing it right. Like, give us real segregation. Get out of our neighborhoods. Leave us be. We'll be happy. I mean, so that was a view of it. And here's a view that says that when they were integrating schools here in Hopkinsville, it was traumatic for the black community. They gave up so much.
Imagine how that was, though. I mean, you go from being completely, socially segregated, in one moment, and in the next moment, you're literally forced to do life together. I mean, as a pastor, I'm just thinking, what if the whitest church in the community and the blackest church in the community were forced to do life every Sunday morning, right? Just imagine.
That sounds like an awesome short story. I should write that story. That sounds like a comedy, right?
Make it happen, man.
But I mean, but think about that for a sec. I mean, like, we've come together in different ways. We've had nights of worship where we're together for an hour and then we go our separate ways. But imagine if you were forced to do this week in, week out, indefinitely.
And half of you are allowed to complain and half of you aren't. Because that's the other thing about this too, is that you had a lot of complaining and standing against it from the white community, but not the black community. Because by and large, while there were pockets of people who were like, we're not really okay with this, we just got to go along with it. It was not cool, more or less, as a black person to be anti-integration. Like, you kind of had, like she's saying, we have to go along with this. Because this is the black answer. And
so imagine this, where you got black and white forced to do church together. And in this example, around the country, there are places where the white folks are protesting the coming together of this. Like, literally, like, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a Ruby, what's Ruby's name? Do you know Ruby?
Yeah, Ruby.
She's the first African-American girl to go to the public school. She does, and she's great. There's actually a documentary of
Bridges.
Ruby Bridges. There's a movie of it on Disney Channel, but it literally describes the horror, the trauma that she went through in this process of being integrated. Now, of course, in Hopkinsville, that kind of scenario didn't really play out, but what we read from Bell Hooks is that there was some internal I don't know what the word is, but division, about and being torn about the idea of doing this. Because I love what she says is we can no longer go by the principal's office and know someone who knows us. They talk about in this about how there was generational education where there were teachers that taught our parents. And now there's people who don't know us.
Yeah. Which I will say, in defense of the current public education system, that is in place again now, where you do have people who can say, I mean, you know that with some people we have here who work here at Edgewood who they taught for decades, and I taught their kids and I teach them. And so that is in existence now. But what is missing is, okay, now the principals know their names and they know their mom's name and all that stuff, but they're not necessarily the same color. And I realize some people say, well, what's the big deal? Isn't it not supposed to be about color, Kamar? And it's like, I get why people say that, but James Baldwin talks about this a lot. When you're not used to seeing someone who looks like you, he has this one of his essays, he talks about the day you realize you're black. Because if you grow up in a world where there are no mirrors and you don't see yourself anywhere, you just think you're the white guy on the TV too. And then one day you realize you're actually black. And he talks about, like, in one day you realize that you're the Indian, you're not the cowboy, and your whole world shifts. And so it is important to have people who look like you. It's hard for some people to understand that because they always see people who look like them. But when you never see someone who looks like you in a leadership position or in a teaching position, it really does affect how you view education.
And if I'm just putting myself in this position back in 1960s, 1970s, if you're culturally separated from the people that you teach, then the behaviors that your students will exhibit are foreign to you. And so you may see that as being disruptive. You may see that as being disrespectful. But in their culture, it may not be viewed that way.
That's on pages 194, 195. Look at you. It's like you're reading the book and just flipping to the next page.
Imagine that.
Teacher's pet over here.
on 194, like, I got some underlined sections where they talk about how they there's this division in how teachers approach discipline.
Yeah.
And the division is pretty clear cut, that it's a color division. That teachers of a certain color view discipline one way, teachers of another color view discipline another way.
Because the majority of the teachers were white.
Yeah.
Or all of the teachers, I guess.
I mean, and so it's, and this is talking about, this is here. It says, so towards like the bottom third of the page, discernible differences separated black and white speakers regarding school discipline and the reason for the overall poor showing of Christian county schools and state assessments. White administrators and teachers tended to lay the blame on negative attitudes among some students and on family problems. The schools, in their view, bore little responsibility for failures that begin at home. Black professionals, on the other hand, spoke of the need for quality teaching at all levels. Quote, if students are challenged, behavior problems will resolve themselves, or all children can learn and discipline problems ought not to mean that a teacher gives up on children. So you have this difference where literally they can see this color line divide. And this is important in education, but I want to get you talking, Brandon, because I know we've talked about this a little bit, but this distinction happens in the church too. Barna Group, they do a lot of studies about, divisions in America in the church. And the largest divide as far as what people think in America is white Christians versus black Christians. White Christians are closer to black atheists than they are to black Christians. And black Christians are closer to white atheists than they are to white Christians.
In what way?
As far as politically, any and everything you look at, every political issue, they are more divided, black and white Christians, than any other demographic in this country. I know we've talked about this and we've experienced it to a degree too. Like, I want to hear what you have to say about this idea of division that is a color-based division and not even anything other than that.
Well, I think a point that Richard made in that there are assumptions made.
You made him too happy. Stop giving him points.
Point here. I'll give you a point too, but not yet. I don't want it to go to your head. But this idea that we make assumptions about somebody based on their external characteristics. And on page 191, you got the quote from Hooks on 90, and then you've got this discussion on 191 about how in that integration process, students who had been academically achieving at Addicts were not given commensurate opportunity in their new integrated setting, which then indicates to me we're not going off of any objective standard here. We're not looking at paper. We're not looking at test scores. We're looking at skin color and making assignments of advanced classes based on external characteristics, external behaviors that are culturally accepted here, that are not culturally accepted here now become discipline issues, right? And I think that that's in large part because, hey, they were breaking some new ground, right? They were trying things, and a lot of those old assumptions were just brought along with the ride. Getting to your question, when we look at the church, I think the exact same thing is happening. Rather than recognizing we have a new thing here, we're trying to bring all the old things with us, right? And I'm going to maybe take shots from both sides here, but that's true in the black church. That's true in the white church. Where instead of coming to Christ, tabula rasa, we're coming to Christ and we're bringing all of our culture with us.
That's right.
And instead of being baptized and, lowered in likeness of his death, raised in newness of life, we're lowered in likeness of his death, and then we're raised with all of our old life coming with us.
Right.
Instead of leaving behind those old cultural assumptions that we had. And that's true for both. That's true for black, that's true for white. And I think that's the primary discipleship task we have as pastors, is to help people see Jesus is something new. And being in his kingdom is something new. And you have to leave behind some old cultural assumptions in order to be faithful in following him.
I like that you talk about baptism, because it's kind of what you're saying. You're struggling with getting your kids to understand manifest destiny. We have this tendency to essentially baptize our culture, and then now it can't be judged because, well, no, this is blood-bought culture now. This is Christian culture. You're just wrong. You have a bad view of Jesus.
You're not patriotic.
But but they'll really say you're not a good Christian. Because if you're a good Christian, you would see it this way. It must be that you're failing to read your Bible, or you're failing to pray, or your pastor's a bad pastor. Instead of being, or maybe I'm the one who's misreading Scripture.
Right.
We
have to submit even our interpretation to the word. Right. And I think that's the mistake we make. We say, God said it, I believe it, that settles it. It's like, well, yeah, but did he? And that was the question Satan asked that got Eve in so much trouble. But the Pharisees asked the same question and got themselves in a lot of trouble too. But did he say enough, or did he say not enough? Right. Those kind of questions are ones that we have to, again, strip away that cultural assumption and just come to the text and say, okay, God, speak to me what you want me to hear. Offend me, God.
Well, okay, so I want to hear from both of you on this one. What is your most favorite not in the Bible quote you've heard from Christians?
Most famous Bible quote.
No, favorite, like your favorite one, like the one that you just love hearing people say. You're like, that's not in the Bible, right?
God helps those who help themselves, or something like that.
Is that your number
God
one?
won't give you more than you can handle.
I like that one. Because it sounds like but that's not what it says.
It's
actually the exact opposite.
It says he will give you a way of escape during temptation, and I think people take that from that.
Yes.
There's a bunch of them.
I attribute those, and I don't remember who I stole this from, so it's not original to me, but I attribute all of those to the book of Second Hesitations. So if you ever hear me quote Second Hesitations, I'm acknowledging this is a quote that people think is in the Bible that's not actually in the Bible.
Exactly.
Second Hesitation. Okay. Let me see.
Now hold on. What's yours?
Mine?
So we got God helps those who help themselves. We've got God won't give you more than you can handle.
It's not a quote so much as like just a story that I myself even referenced and didn't realize it. It was referring to, the story in the Old Testament when Moses lifts up the staff. Right. And he's got the bronze serpent. And he says, you look to this and you'll be saved. And the story goes on. It's like, and a lot of people didn't look and died. That's not actually in the Bible. Listen, that part's not in the Bible. Nor does it say the people didn't look.
Right.
That's your favorite.
We just added to it.
And that one got me for a while because I'm like, that sounds real.
That makes sense.
That sounds like Israelites.
I could preach that.
I think I actually have, to be honest. That's what I'm saying.
You have to give the mea culpa the next Sunday.
It's like that's not in the Bible.
Yes.
Who knew?
Okay.
I love it.
That's good.
So is the 195, just the bottom there. There's one more section on this portion where it gives, it's like a separate paragraph there of just talking about this idea of education. It says, if children whose parents are uneducated, or undereducated, poor, illiterate, or absent can't learn, as some people, even educators, claim, then why do poor children in some schools do so well? Good teaching. High-performing schools have principals who won't let teachers excuse the poor performance of their students. Everybody in the school believes that every child can learn, and all students are expected to perform. Poverty and race are not accepted as excuses. The adults, not the children, are ultimately responsible. It is teaching that matters.
So there are two perspectives. There's two schools of thought on this. So apparently the white administrators were saying that it's the problem with the home. Yeah. It's the problem with the family. If the parents would just step up and do their job, then things would be better. We hear these arguments even today.
Yeah.
And the other argument is that no, there needs to be better teaching. And what I was thinking of, I wrote in my notes, we need principals like Joe Clark. If you remember Joe Clark from Lean On Me.
Yeah.
You know, he was the kind of, the educator who was, no, we can get into these kids' minds, but we have to figure out how to do that. And then he became a principal of one of the worst schools, true story, turned the school around. And I love about what Glazer says is there's examples of poor communities where they turned it around and these students could learn and the schools got better. And it was because there was a focus on better teaching and really reaching these students. And so there's examples of where this worked. And so we're looking at this from a community that says that, no, it's the family problem. And, of course, family could be better, but that can't be the only solution. And so I don't know where we are in 2023 when it comes to this in Christian County, but I know those arguments are still alive today.
It's a large part. I mean, so I'm not an educator officially. Well, I am a sub for the district still. I'm still a sub for the district. Okay. And so I can speak as to how things were as of January
this year,
13th, 2023. That was my last day in the classroom.
Perfect.
You like how I did
that
the math
hyper specific date. Tell us what you're going to tell us.
But I mean, no, that a huge emphasis is on what can we do to support the families. We need to get the kids here in school because, if we have them in school, we feed them and they're in a safe environment and they have that consistency. And I get that. I do. Like I was thinking about it just this week. A notification went out about what they're going to do as far as the extreme heat. And I told my wife, I'm like, I hope they don't cancel school because of the heat, because a lot of these kids will be safer in a school with air conditioning than in their homes that don't have it. That's the reality of the poverty we have here. I mean, I've been talking to people. You wouldn't believe how many houses in the city limits have dirt floors, and that's legal here. Like that's so sad. That's the living conditions we have in the city. Wow. And so that is true. There is not as much push on just educators that are quality educators, and that's more out of necessity. Like they say the things and they are supportive in the sense of saying we want quality educators, but at the end of the day, they need a warm body in the room. They don't have enough teachers, and so they'll take anybody, and the kids know it, and the teachers know it, and so that kind of gets the meaning at the end of the day when you're sitting there and you're like, you'll pay anybody to do this job because you want just somebody to do the job, and then if I do it amazingly. There's no incentives because of how unions work and all that. You can't pay a teacher, hey, you know what? Your kids are amazing. Here's an extra $10,000 a year because you're that good of a teacher. Yeah. It's what sort of degrees do you have? How many years have you worked here? That's all that matters.
So how do we change that? So, going back to, this post-civil rights era, I mean, by and large, you had white teachers teaching all students, including African-American students, made up 30, 40, sometimes maybe even 50% of the population. Yeah. And because of the nature of segregation, because of the nature of how we viewed white Hopkinsvillians in this community, they were against slavery. They were against these dark beasts in human form that would come across the border. I think it's easy to see how these white teachers probably had issues with teaching some of these black students.
Well, I would say the bigger issue these days is less them being white and more them not being from here.
Because a lot of the teachers are not from Hopkinsville. A lot of teachers don't live
here. And so that's a hit on the kids mentally. Like the fact that I lived in town was just huge for them. That I would tell them, like, you can come to my house. You better not. I'll call the cops on you.
But you could.
I tell them, but you could. And I'll be hanging out there. I said, there's one day a year you can come to my house. Halloween. Passing out candy. You're more than happy to throw candy at you.
Right.
And every year, it was funny. Every year, the kids would be like, oh, I didn't go. And I'd have like one or two students like, I went. And I'll tell you, like, the thing about me is I love, even as a kid, I never liked going trick-or-treating. I love handing out the candy. And so I literally hand out like handful at a time. That's my only quantity is one handful. And I got big hands. Yeah. And so they'd be like, yeah, he's giving me like 2 or 3 handfuls. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like,
You don't have the king size Snickers or something like that, man?
I mean, I have stuff like that in there too,
Okay,
but literally
okay.
it's like a pick up handful. There you go. You know what? I
Nice.
like you. 2 handfuls for you. like seriously, that's what and so I would tell the kids like, but they just the idea that I'm approachable like that. And there were some teachers, I'm not the only one. There are several teachers who were living in town, but a large percentage of them, they don't live in the area. So that hits them. They don't understand the culture. They don't understand the community. And then you do have the number of them that are white and don't understand the culture still of it being Hispanic or black. I mean,
Right.
34% of this city is black, or 34% of this area, right? Black. 34% of our teachers aren't black.
What percent you think that you know of?
As of when I was still there, last time I saw people, I would say like maybe 10, 12%.
Like you were at Christian County High.
Yeah.
How many African American male teachers were there?
I think counting me, there were 3.
3.
When I first started teaching there, I was the only one.
Wow. Okay.
And then I think there were 3 because you had one guy who he was brought on and then he got certified while he was there that last year. So I think he's back again this year. I think I saw him there.
Yeah.
And then there was another one who's one of the coaches. And that was something, and I'm not saying this to knock coaches, but that also does make a difference.
Yeah.
That the vast majority of the persons of color, especially men of color who are in education, they're a coach of something. And that's like their way in is that, well, sports.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, I don't do sports.
Right.
I know there's a ball and it goes in the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I can do some books.
There you go. The thing about it, so Christian County High School, as we know it, was built in 1959. This is not, these are my notes. Not
yeah,
yours.
these
He's looking at his notes. There's
yeah,
nothing there.
Yeah. So Hopkinsville High School, as we know it today, was built in 1962.
Yes.
Right. So we know, was it 1965, civil rights? In 1972, right, there was a need by citizens of Hopkinsville to create a private school.
Yeah. Well,
There's
a desire, not a need.
Well, there is a desire, and what they probably felt there was a need because money had to go into this, right? I usually don't give money to desires. I give money to need, right? And so we know that 1965 was what on the line in history. That's the civil rights movement. We know that there were some blurred lines of when desegregation took place here in Hopkinsville, but within, was that 7 years after? Yeah. 7 years after the passage of the civil rights legislation, there was a private school that was created here in Hopkinsville,
Yes.
and it's UHA.
Yes.
And I don't have all the stats on this, but I'm thinking it was an all-white private school.
I will say in their defense right now,
I didn't say that there's anything wrong with that.
they are an somewhat ethnically diverse school right now, but they are not largely financially diverse.
Okay.
Because what you have is we have a considerable amount of, like, for example, we have a number of people who are of Indian descent.
Sure.
Not Native American, Indian descent,
Sure.
who are here as physicians, and their kids go there.
Sure.
Stuff like that. And so there's
Yeah.
that.
It's 50 years old. Yeah.
But, I mean, so that's the history. Are you aware of that history of the fact that the rise of private schools in America is a response to desegregation?
And that was my point.
I know that was your point. That's why I was asking if he was aware of it.
I was tracking with him.
But were you aware of that before? That's
Yes.
the history of that?
Yes.
Because I know a lot of people, especially a lot of white people, aren't familiar with that. They don't realize that that's why they exist, especially private Christian schools.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why it is private Christian schools exist the way they do in this country, because you realize there were Catholic schools before that.
Right.
Right.
But the Catholic schools didn't care about integration. But you had people who would go around and say, I'm going to have a private Christian school, and because it's a Christian school, I can now legally segregate. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a very serious issue of, do I have the right, because of my religion, to not let black people into my school?
Yeah.
When was this is at the university level, not at the local level, but when was the Bob Jones decision?
The Florida one, the interracial?
Yeah.
That had to be in
No,
the 70s.
that was a different one.
Because he didn't allow interracial dating.
Yeah.
But he didn't allow African Americans in Bob Jones University till it had to be early 70s.
Early
I'm thinking.
70s. Yeah. Okay.
Because that's UHA. There was that fight. There was that pushback of, we want your quote you like to do about segregation now.
Hey.
Like that's the idea. And so when you look at private schools today in America, we do still have it.
Yeah.
In certain places, certain communities, private schools are ethnically segregated.
Right.
In other communities, it's just monetarily. It's socioeconomic. But the ends are still there. Of there's certain kinds are going to be there, and other kinds aren't.
And the reason why I bring that up is because in a little bit we're going to be talking about housing.
Yeah.
And what we see.
Will we ever get to housing? I don't think we will.
Maybe not in this one, but because what we see in education, we eventually see in housing as well. And so there's just a mindset that created. And I'm not saying that it's, it was discovered or founded or it was by and large here in Hopkinsville. It was all over the country. That this new reality of the ethnicities and the cultures and the races blending together, that caused some strife. Yeah. It caused confusion. I mean, we see the rise in homeschooling now.
Yeah, I was going to say I was going to hit you guys closer to home. That's a continuation of that. I mean, when you look at your homeschool groups, they are rather monochromatic.
Yeah. Matter of fact, we went on a field trip after we moved to Hopkinsville. I don't know if I told you guys about this. We went to the Discovery Park of America, which is
I've heard the story. I don't know if you've heard the story. Yeah.
I haven't heard the
Discovery
story.
Park of America. It was so our local homeschool group, which I think it's great. I'm glad we have it. There's a lot of participation. There's over 100 families that are a part of it.
Yeah.
So we went to the Discovery Park of America. There was 100 people there.
100 people or 100 families?
100 people.
Okay. All
100
right.
people there. There's a lot of people. It was great time, great tour. We've been there multiple times. I was the only African American there. Now, my kids are a blended of swirly mocha awesomeness. but I was the only African American there out of 100 people. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference. There's a difference in, kids who are in public school, private school, homeschool. The reasons are all different all across the map why parents decide to do different things. Yeah. Now, early on, we could say, wow, maybe in 1972, maybe there was a reason why white parents wanted to take their kids out of public school. We could, assume that it was because they didn't want their kids to go to school with black kids, but we don't really know that. But we do know that today there's an influx of parents taking their kids out of public schools and homeschooling them for a variety of different political reasons that have been lifted up to the surface today.
And an added complication of that is that not everybody can afford to homeschool because it is a cost. I mean, you cannot be a 2-parent income home in that situation. And when you consider that and you consider the other things, the other systems we talked about that predisposes certain groups to not be able to afford to have somebody stay home, it further segregates and says, well, you're not even going to be, this isn't even an option for you. Yeah. Like if you wanted to homeschool, minority family, you can't even afford to.
Yeah.
But okay, I did want, so Brandon, you've been on some mission trips. What was one of the easiest mission trips you went outside the country?
One of the easiest mission trips that I've been on outside the country.
I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I've never had a quote unquote hard mission trip. Okay. I've always been through blind good fortune, through the grace of God, however you want to put it. I've never really been on a hard mission.
Because you didn't go to Brazil with me.
I did not go to
Haiti
Brazil
with me.
I have not been to Haiti with you.
Let's go to Haiti.
But
I've been to relatively easy mission trips.
So when you're in Ecuador,
okay,
you're there, you're not fluent in Spanish. Mm-hmm. You eat the food, you're in the place, and then you go to your hotel at night, and if you happen to have the time, pick up the phone, you call your wife, and you're like, okay, now I can just breathe and be American English-speaking Brandon. All day long, you're living, and you're still you, but there's that's their layer, right?
Right.
It's not, it doesn't break you, but there is a burden.
I'm not from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was hearing like your story, like Richard, there is that element to it where you're there, you're with your family, homeschool thing, and you're still remembering it all this time later of like, I'm in a foreign place.
Yeah.
Like
we're counting.
Like,
yeah.
So I don't know if that maybe helps because that is one of the things when we've talked about the mask and what it is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the minority stress that they now call it psychologically that we endure is a little bit of that. It's almost like being on a good mission trip. Mm-hmm. It's not that anybody's coming after me. I'm not getting attacked, but it's this constant foreign feeling that I can't quite just be American right now. Like does that translate for you?
Does that ever go away? Is my question.
At home.
Well, no. I mean, is there a point culturally as a nation where that ever goes away?
As a nation,
is there a point at which we say this no longer
Matters.
there's no longer this minority stress.
Yeah.
Because what you're describing would be, I guess, probably what I would feel if, day in and day out, let's say, okay, Kamar, you're here as a black man in a predominantly Anglo congregation, right? You have that minority stress. If I were to go and be on staff at a predominantly African-American congregation, right? I would feel that minority stress.
Yes.
There would be that sense of, okay, wait, this isn't my place. How does that go away?
Well, see, the difference is that the second you left the office and went back into the street, you've left the stress. And so that's the only difference with it. Where it's like, okay, you leave.
Okay, so hypothetically,
Great point.
Yeah.
hypothetically, Hopkinsville,
Yeah.
through a variety of demographic shifts that take place, becomes 51% African American, 49% Anglo.
Yeah.
Does that change anything?
I want it to, and that's something that is my personal drive. I talk to guys about what I want to do with my own PhD research stuff because I say, I want to find a way for us to see what is the proper cultural path forward. But like, I remember the first time I went to Atlanta as a kid. Like going to Atlanta was
Chocolate
because that's like I'm going to a city that is a black city. It exists. It is real, and it felt so weird. Like it was awesome, but in ways that's hard to explain because it's like this really is a black city. Like
It's kind of like when I went to Haiti.
Everywhere, we're everywhere. Like
In every capacity.
like look at this. I don't even know what to do with this, but smile. But now I'm not from here. I gotta stop smiling. I mean, like there's that. And so the way for it to go away, we as the church have not. I feel that we have not done a proper job of identifying why God made us different colors. I do not doubt for a second God did it on purpose. He did. There's not an accident. I don't think it's a result of the fall either. I think that inherent in Adam and Eve was there's going to be a bunch of colors coming out. It's going to happen. And I think that was part of his plan. I think the plan was we're going to move to different parts of the earth, spread out like he intended for us to do. And in living in these different areas, we're going to have different physiological characteristics, different ways we eat, different ways we dress. Culture was going to happen. We are going to have separate cultures. I think God meant for that to exist, and he meant for it to be something that glorifies him. I think it's a tool. It's like I was telling my daughter dropping her off this morning, I said, it's a tool. Everything's a tool. I was talking about her emotions. I was like, I want you to start journaling and figure out what you're feeling. Because she's like, I say, how are you feeling? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, I need you to start finding ways to put labels on these.
Yeah.
Because it's a tool. Emotions are tools. They can be good, they can be bad, but you can't use the tool if you can't even tell what tool it is. And so culture is a tool meant to glorify God, but we haven't even begun to identify what it really even is. We don't really know what ethnicity is other than, well, I'm this color and you're that color. Or culture, well, my culture is this, your culture is that. It's always a me versus, never just a me thing. And so I think that once we've done that as a church, we can then show people this is what society's supposed to be. This is what it looks like to let people just be their culture without any of that stress.
And that's what I was trying to drive at, is that the nation can't answer that question of how do we deal with minority stress.
No.
Right? The nation can't answer that because if the solution is just to flip the percentages, well, then we got the opposite problem.
Yeah.
Right? So that can't be the solution. Or to just, genetically engineer things or socially engineer things. So it's like 50-50, right down the middle all the time. No, that's not going to work. I think what you say is the crucial point. There is an opportunity for the church to say, my primary identity is black, my primary identity is white, my culture is against me, my culture is for me. In this context, I'm comfortable. In this context, I'm not. All of that goes away when we let Christ speak. I made you this way on purpose, for a purpose. Like that is the most revolutionary statement. And I know that's second hesitations. That's not actually in the Bible. But distilling down some of Jesus' teaching is you're not an accident.
No.
Right? God has a plan. God has a purpose for your life.
Yeah.
And that purpose is for you to glorify him in whatever unique. I'm getting ready to preach 1 Peter 4. We are stewards of the many-hued grace of God. If you translate it differently, the rainbow-hued grace of God.
You know me and rainbows.
I know you and rainbows. But when we think about that, like
God's
what
promises.
makes that beautiful, what makes that beautiful is the variety.
Yeah.
And that's what Peter's saying is in the church, we are meant to celebrate this incredible diversity.
Yeah.
Where were they first called Christians?
Antioch.
Where they had a racially and assumably culturally diverse group.
And economically, it was economically, culturally, racially diverse. Yeah.
You know, and that I was going to point out, like there are certain places in New York City. I didn't live in New York. I read about this, but there's like over 100 different ethnicities within a few blocks.
Oh yeah, New York's awesome like that.
You know, I mean, you're talking about this place where everything around you is different, where being a minority doesn't bother you when everybody around you is a different minority. It neutralizes the stigma that someone around me is different. Now, I think you're right in the fact and I think we've talked about this before, that I think that the church coming together, a multi-ethnic church, is part of the solution to that. The problem is, other than Antioch, other than a few moments throughout church history, you don't see that, especially here in the U.S. In the U.S., we've had so many problems against culture and ethnicity and race, but I still think the church has the best solution to that, and it's to come together under that banner that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Yeah.
And I really do have hope in Hopkinsville. That we should do that. That should be a hope for Hopkinsville. It's like a
Hopkinsville.
It's like, you know, one of the things, Hopkinsville, right? No. So think about this. Do you guys remember
Hopetown?
Hopetown.
Now you guys are.
I like that better.
You guys are younger than me. I don't know if you remember this. I feel like the old man.
I do remember that. I do remember that I'm younger than you.
Okay, you remember that. Okay. Do you remember We Are the World?
Yes.
Remember that video and all that? You remember that? Okay,
yes.
I didn't know. I saw
replays.
You saw You saw it, yeah.
Brandon.
Wow. Okay.
You've got like,
you saw the rerun.
You've got like 4 years on him or something.
Yeah, but you know, I was like
it was a very informative 4 years.
When you guys were in middle school, I was like a senior or something like that. Right. So think about it. That was a cultural phenomenal event that you had all these like 20 plus artists singing, and everybody loved it in their own way, because not everybody loved Michael Jackson, but they might like The Boss, you know, Bruce Springsteen. They loved their cultural nuances of how they sung the song, and it really brought people together in this one little moment, and everybody liked something about it.
Yeah.
And the idea that was not a Christian song. Those were not Christian artists, but it was a shadow of the best that the culture could do in bringing people together for that moment, for some cause to make money. I think it was to help Africa or something like that. But imagine if the people of God could come together under the banner of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Think about how powerful, how motivating, how revivalistic that would be in our communities and in our culture and even in our country or even around the world if that was able to happen. But there's got to be that unifying, you know, pride casting down moment of where we say, you know what, it's better that we unify under Jesus than stay separated because we prefer our differences.
I think that's one of the things that really saddens me about stuff like that, is that we can see moments when the world will come together. And then oftentimes you say, where's the church? And the most vocal parts of the church are like being hateful towards that. They're like, oh, this is bad, this is evil. Or they're just out there preaching hellfire and damnation, which, yes, hell is real and people go to hell. Mm-hmm. That is true. But it saddens me that it's like we say we have the answer, and everybody's like, well, then why do you guys look less unified than everybody else? And we could be like, whoa, that's because they're unified in their sin. And I mean, and yes, that's what we believe theologically. But I wonder if our pastor friends who say stuff like that ever stop and say, but what does that look like from the outside? Like they probably say to themselves, well, if that's unified in sin, I guess I want sin. Shouldn't
we be more unified in Christ than they are in their sin?
I mean, right. I mean, it really does look bad on Jesus. Yeah.
Well, and again, and I don't mean to keep hitting on this, but to me, the fundamental issue is, what am I bringing to this of my old life? What am I trying to import into the kingdom that really belongs to my former residency? You know, and that to me is the biggest issue. My home state of Idaho, I was born in Oregon, but I consider Idaho my home state. My home state of Idaho, we were taught growing up to dislike Californians. Because here was the narrative.
Just hate us because you can't be.
They're going to fall in the ocean anyway.
They're falling in the ocean anyways. Exactly. Let's rejoice and be glad at the judgment of God. No, but it was this idea that Californians were selling homes in California, you know, for massive prices. They were driving up land prices in Idaho, and then they were voting for the very same policies that made them want to leave California. That was the narrative.
That's the narrative in Tennessee.
And in Hopkinsville.
And in Kentucky, let's be honest.
It's narrative.
Everybody dislikes Californians Kamar being the rare occasional
okay.
exception.
Everybody wants to go there. Nobody wants to stay there.
That's what it's, I mean, everybody hates on Calvary. It's so funny because it's like,
Right.
wow, but I mean,
But everybody loves it.
you're right. It's
So
like,
I'm just saying that was what the narrative was. And then I look back now and I'm like, but we do the same thing to the church.
Yeah.
It's like all this stuff we hate about the world, all this stuff we hate about our former life, we just bring it with us. And then we're surprised when we don't like church.
That's deep.
It's like, well, it's because you're not at church.
yeah.
You need to preach
You're
that.
at home. I am.
Yes.
Are you?
I'm going to stand
You
up
know,
in just a
this week?
second, right now.
Come on.
No, but that whole idea of I can't import my identity
Yeah.
Yeah.
to the church.
Yeah.
It is no longer I who live; it is Christ who lives in me, and so my primary identity can no longer be white Idahoan, right? And
You the what? I was joking.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then Kamar, I would say that your primary identity can no longer be Kamar, Black Californian.
Yeah.
Right.
It has to be Christ.
Yeah.
And once we get to that level, I feel like we begin to make progress. But as long as we keep trying to import those former identities, that's where we run into the issues.
I would say it's not just importing it, the former identities ourselves, but also exporting it onto others. Because that's something our oldest, he's senior year of high school. He's going to be leaving the house, soon. And I'm looking at things in him. And I told my wife the other day, I said, I'm realizing that some of the issues I have with him, the issue, and the way I told him myself, I says, the issue is that his culture is not my culture. And I use that term to say that there are things that he's going to believe and do that are not the way that I choose to live.
Right.
But it's not inherently wrong in and of itself. And I told her, I said, we got to realize that we've always taught our kids, you want to grow up and be your own person. I said, and it's too late now. The youngest is 6. Too late for me to change my philosophy on parenting now, so I'm stuck with it. I got to follow this through. But by having that philosophy, that means that my kids are going to grow up and they're going to have cultures that aren't quite like mine. And I'm going to have to give them that freedom to say, that is not the way I would do that ever. But it's not sin. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that we do, this is, again, going back to like the black-white issue, even in the church or in community in general, is that so often I'll sit there and maybe misjudge or export my culture to somebody else and say, Brandon, your problem is you're not doing it my way. But that's my way, not the way,
Right.
not your way. If God really did make us on purpose to be who he made us to be, then the question shouldn't be, why aren't you being like me? It's, are you being like Jesus? Well, I can't say you're not. Jesus never had this situation. Well, if I can't pinpoint a sin in it, then maybe I should give grace and focus on the beam in my eye instead.
Romans 14. Romans 14 is the most neglected passage in the church today. We have ignored it, I'm convinced.
Yeah. Quote
And
it.
it transforms.
Which says,
Romans 14, which says that you welcome those you disagree with,
Yeah.
but not to dispute.
Yes.
yeah.
Right? And, each slave before his own master stands. Loaded language, Paul. You should have been careful with the language you use there.
He didn't know that would be a problem later on, I guess.
I guess not.
Yeah.
But I think that stands because I don't judge your service to Christ by my service to Christ.
Yes,
I judge it by Christ.
exactly.
It's what you were saying,
Yeah.
right? But it's Romans 14, that whole idea of we welcome others with different views. And Paul is not saying every view is equally valid.
No.
He's not saying that.
No.
He talks about weaker brothers, stronger brothers.
Yeah.
He talks about eating, not eating. He talks in other places about, I wish that all men were as I am. There is a sense in which he's saying, evaluate the ideals, but don't, if it's not sin, don't make that the issue
Yeah.
of distinction.
Yeah.
Don't make that an issue of division. And it's there that the church has its opportunity to show true biblical unity.
Yeah. All right.
And it's hard to get there.
So to what you were signaling with the people who are watching, like, why is he signaling? I'm not going to stop the recording because I'm going to keep it going. And I might break it up, I might not. We'll see. I'll decide. But that way also I can offer like a full version for people who want to just listen to the whole thing.
Gotcha.
See, I got it.
You're smooth.
Options.
I think things.
Options.
But
You're like a modern Billy D. Williams.
I don't
You know
who-
Billy D?
I don't know who Billy D. Williams
You don't know
is.
Billy D. Williams.
Generally assume if it's a cultural reference, I'm not going to get it.
Colt 45?
he definitely won't
No.
get that.
No.
If it's a cultural reference, I probably
That's
won't.
Lando Calrissian.
Let's talk about the first and only
I
black
know
mayor.
Lando.
Modern day Lando.
Let's talk about the first and only black mayor. What it says, which is no longer true. This is now outdated. We've had another black mayor.
It is outdated.
We've had another black mayor.
Yes.
So, but
Mr. Lynch.
Yes, Mayor Lynch. He was decent. I mean, he wasn't bad.
Did he get voted in, or is he? Because Carter left and he took over.
That's a whole nother, where we've not exactly had. I mean, he had to run to continue it out, so he did get some votes on that aspect.
Okay,
but he wasn't officially voted in for like a full term.
Gotcha.
Be mayor.
Gotcha.
From my understanding of it. Yeah.
Okay.
But so this first guy, was it F.E. Whitney?
All mayors are equal, but some are more equal than others.
His title was Mayor Lynch. He's not like a lesser mayor.
I know. But he's like
Here's what I mean by that. Okay.
mayor in training or something.
Like, come on, man.
So
He's
it's
my
kind of
mayor.
like how you could have you can serve 3 terms as president.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't get voted in,
Unless you're FDR.
like so somebody dies.
And he's the reason we fixed
So
that.
so let's say somebody dies on inauguration. You
Right.
come in
Yeah.
and you can still be elected twice.
Correct.
And that's what I'm saying. Like with that, it's like,
Gotcha.
yeah, he was in, but he got in not elected. He got in the way that Whitney wished he was let in, and he wasn't. Okay, because that's kind of what goes on here. That you had a mayor leaving, and you got black guy who's been everything in the city. I mean, like he was founding member of the city council. He's a successful business person.
Yeah.
He's done everything you can do and be an upstanding black man in society, pretty much in his time. And he's like, we need a mayor. Why don't just make it me? And they're like, okay, it can be you for just a second. We're gonna have an election though.
Yeah. One thing about that, though, what was the composition of the city council at that? But we don't know that, or what was I don't know what the population demographic was of the city at that time.
When we're
either.
doing our live, we could possibly ask Alyssa.
She would probably know
Miss
that.
Keller might know that. Off
She
the top of her
would,
head.
because I'm wondering, like, if it was a diverse amount of city council members, or was it a majority of one particular race?
It's probably similar to like we have now. You have black council members from the black neighborhoods and white council
Right.
members from the white neighborhoods. And there are more white neighborhoods represented than black neighborhoods. Yeah.
And there's a reason we're about to talk about all that, because there's a certain thing that actually helped to create those pockets of places that we see today.
Yeah.
And that word is redlining.
Yes. But wait,
Not
mayor,
there yet.
Mayor.
No, mayor.
Just wanna-
Maybe mayor.
Just want to talk about that. Like,
Yes, let's
you
talk
had
about
this
the mayor.
moment, and it was, 1972.
1972.
So we're after segregation. Segregation's technically done.
Right.
Civil rights has kind of petered out. Like, okay, civil rights movement is
That was a thing.
it,
No
it
more.
happened. Okay, we've moved on.
Yeah.
We've overcome. So
Yeah.
we say. And this guy's like, make me mayor. I'm qualified. And they're like,
Yeah, I
we're
didn't
gonna
like
have these
that.
2 white guys run instead.
He said, I deserve to be mayor.
Yes.
That was the first mistake, I think.
Why? Why do you think that was a mistake?
I don't think you can just go and say, I deserve to be this. That even if he was qualified, that makes me not want to vote for him.
I mean, he actually said, quote, under the circumstances, I can't help but feel if I had been white, then I would have been assured of being named mayor.
He probably would have. But you still don't go around saying, I deserve to be mayor.
But what if you do?
I don't know. That's like me. To me, that's the equivalent of me jumping on top of the coffee table in my house and saying, I'm the man around here. You need to respect me.
Okay, but he didn't jump on a table and say it. It's more like you walking through the house and just calmly saying, "I am the man of this house. I deserve to be respected here." And your wife and kids would be like, "Yeah, duh. That's why we respect you." And then that'd be that. Like,
He said he used qualifying language. He said, "I think that I am qualified
thank you,
by
Brandon.
virtue of my former service." And I'm paraphrasing.
Maybe
but
I heard it the way I wanted to.
maybe
Maybe.
he qualified it, but he does say, "I think I have earned the right to be mayor."
That's
he does
how you say it in City Hall.
But he says, "I think." He doesn't stand up and just declaratively say, "Make me mayor or else."
True.
I mean, I don't.
That's
know.
the way I hear it.
Y'all keep fighting. I'm just going to watch.
It said Whitney was the only charter member of the modern council system, taking office at its inception in 1950. He's been a city council member since 1953, in addition to everything else he had done.
Yeah, that's true. But he was African American.
And that's what
But
it
he was
said.
African-American.
His appointment is the only course the present council can take that will not reflect race prejudice. There is no other option. This is the official opinion
It
of
is.
other people of, if we don't make him mayor,
Yeah.
it's obvious that we're prejudiced.
And it brings a really good point, I think. Were white Hopkinsville people, Hopkinsvillians, I don't know why I want to say that, do they have a fear of black leadership?
Yes.
But I think that was true then?
I want to qualify that by saying that it's not a unique Hoptown thing. It is part of the nature of how our country exists. When you think about all the stuff we've talked about in the first 5 chapters and all of the years of essentially propaganda and indoctrination, Americans in general have this hesitation of black leadership, and not of any one color. Black Americans too. All Americans have an inherent hesitation of the idea of a strong black leader.
Miss Ellen would roll in her grave.
It's
we as Americans have a strong distrust of leadership in general.
Yeah.
There is an incredibly deep seated fear of authority.
Yeah.
And fear of government that runs all through American politics.
Yeah.
And so I think that plays in as well. And then you add the race issue on top of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this probably isn't going to be healthy, whatever we do.
Look
at the way we talk about politicians.
Yeah.
We make lawyer jokes and politician jokes. And it's like, when did that happen? Probably about the time we said, hey, that king over there can't tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Right.
There's that deep-seated kind of distrust of authority, and then we take a black candidate and we kind of put all of the fears of our politics and then all of the fears of our racial views, and you swirl that all together. It's a pretty potent mix.
And like I said, and it's not just black Americans struggle with it too. I mean, I remember when I was running an office here in Kentucky, it didn't matter the color of my employees. I would get a lot of hateful things said about me to HR about me being a horrible, evil man. And it's like, what'd you do? I told him he couldn't take a lunch break to go poop. Yes, that actually happened.
That makes sense.
I feel like
are we violating any HR confidentiality requirements here?
I feel like if he just got back from an hour lunch break and then said, "Now I need to go take another hour to go poop," I'm like, you got work to do, guy.
Have to hold it. Sorry.
I feel like that's my job as the boss, is to tell them to do their job. But it was, and I would come home and I would be so frustrated at times because I had not been in a leadership position like that.
Yeah.
I experienced it in medicine, but I expected it in medicine.
Sure.
Black doctors are very rare. In fact, I don't know if you know this, statistically speaking, they're actually less. The percentage of black doctors in America now is less than it was in the early 1900s.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's not getting better. But so you expect it there, but I didn't expect it in the regular traditional workplace. And I would come home to my wife, and it just was like, I don't get it. I don't understand. And eventually I started realizing they don't know what it is to have somebody who looks like me actually just carry myself like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's not a normal thing. In TV, you don't see it. In entertainment, you don't. It's not a normal thing. And so we're working against the grain as it is already. Where people said you must be hiding something, or you're not really who you say you are, and then that develops into what they call the imposter syndrome, where then you take it on, and then you wonder, am I really faking it?
Yeah.
Do I really deserve to be here? Am I qualified to be the boss?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not. They're going to find out, and I'm going to be fired.
Just so we're clear, that's not just a black man thing.
No, imposter syndrome.
That's
imposter syndrome
thing.
is a thing that everybody can suffer from. Yeah.
I've got some. I don't know.
I is one.
You is what she is. So I've got some in my mind. I've got all these thoughts that are swirling around about local politics. If the African American population at one point was close to 50%, now you say it's borderline 35,
34% is what I recently heard from a city
something like that.
official,
and only one or two mayors, right, in the history of the community. And I guess at the same time, never a majority of the city council.
Yeah.
And and again, I'm from the outside. I'm here now. I've been here, my family and I've been here 2.5 years. It makes me wonder why. And I know we're going to get to this, but I think it affects what we're talking about now and you said it very eloquently, is that pockets of people have stayed in those pockets, and those pockets can only vote in a certain number of city council.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that why didn't...
Well, actually, that's not true.
Okay.
This is the weird thing about Hoptown.
What?
Okay, so
Can you vote everywhere?
Everybody votes for every city council member.
We do?
Yeah.
So
you don't just vote for so you can only represent where you live.
Are you sure?
But everybody votes for all of them.
So I can vote for somebody in another district.
Yeah,
you're
isn't that
sure
crazy?
about it? Because there was a debate about
which
that.
makes it all the more upsetting that we don't have a better
you
representation.
sure?
I don't live in
You're in the county.
Hopkinsville.
So
I'm
you
in the
don't
county.
count.
Yeah,
so
you're in the county.
I don't have a
Yeah,
dog
this is
in
a
this
Hoptown
fight.
thing.
Are you?
No.
You're
Yes.
100% sure because there's a debate
I am
every
98%.
election.
You know, I'm gonna pull out my phone.
Yeah, please do,
I won't be
'cause
able to find that on the phone
there's
very
a-
easily. Like I'm looking like Google's not gonna show me that really easily.
No, because
But
there's a
Because when I heard
debate
it-
on that every election since I've been here that people say I can't vote on this. Yes, you can. And then there was somebody who was running for office and they said they couldn't vote for.
Think back to the last ballot you got.
Okay, I can't remember.
Oh, because
I voted
because they were all on there.
I always vote, but I
They
can't
were
remember.
they were all on there.
I can't remember.
They're all.
But here's
on
the
there.
thing.
Hey, you know what? Molly, she listens.
Yeah,
Molly, can you chime in and write a comment or something and
Yeah.
verify if I'm right or wrong?
we'll
and
let
then
Molly do
then I
that.
can send out a correction.
Fact checked us.
Because Molly knows.
Yeah. Yeah,
I know she
so,
knows.
So,
But
so I
yes,
mean, that
that's-
makes
that's
it
something-
even more weird. Does
Yes.
that mean that the black electorate does not vote?
Yes. And I realize I have black citizens who live here. I'm not going to say friends because all my black friends are going to be like, yeah, I agree with you.
Sure, you have
I-
black friends. That's what all the people
I do have black friends, thank you. but I live in a pocket as well where, I mean, you're an example of it. My black friends, we think
Yeah.
the same on these sort of things. And so I know they would say the same thing. I realize there are black people out there who would be like, no, that's not true. We get out and vote. And I would say, really? Then why does it look like it does? Like you don't get
Yeah.
out and vote because when
Okay.
you look at the percentage of them, now there is, this too from judicial system. So there is the idea that you have people who maybe they're felons, so they aren't allowed to vote.
Sure.
That's not a huge, I mean, our convictions here are largely not felons.
But in Kentucky,
They're-
you can't vote. That's another big thing.
Yeah.
In Kentucky, if you're elected or if you're convicted of a crime, you can't vote unless you get permission to vote again.
Yeah,
Which-
but that's felonies. Like I mean,
That's felonies,
Not,
yes.
not misdemeanors. I mean, so
No,
the,
no,
the
it's
majority of the people
felons.
here who deal with going in and out of the prison system, they're not felons. They're just criminals. I mean,
Yeah.
I know realize that's a weird quantifying, but I
They're
mean,
just criminals.
I mean, they get arrested, they go to jail, but so they can still vote technically.
So if your point is true, then you broke my thought. If that's true, I concede to that. But I was thinking there's something wrong with the situation.
Yeah.
But I'd still love to hear the
Like,
truth.
yeah,
on that.
because when I first heard that, I was like, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard it from a city council person. Actually, I don't remember which one it was, but they were saying, vote for me for city council. I'm like, I don't live in your district. And they said, you can vote for me anyways. In Hopkinsville, you vote for all the city council persons. And I was like, that's crazy.
Interesting.
Which is great. It means the best person gets elected.
That's not great. That
No,
means
it's
that I
bad.
don't. That means that I get to choose who represents your neighborhood,
Oh, and if I have the majority,
which really fits with what we see.
oh,
Is that the majority of people who show up to vote are going to determine who gets to sit on council, even if they don't live in the neighborhood represented by that council member.
so what we have currently is a super majority because in Kentucky, we don't do this in Tennessee, but in Kentucky, you have to register if you're a Republican or a Democrat or whatever party you're representing. And then right now, it's like every single city count or pretty much is a Republican.
Almost every elected official in Hopkinsville right now is of the Republican Party.
City, county, and mayor's office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and council and like jailer, all that stuff. Like everybody, just about every elected position, I believe, is
Gotcha.
Republican at the moment.
Gotcha.
Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah. How do you feel?
I'm
about
not
that?
surprised.
How do you feel about that?
Again,
didn't
so I'm registered as a Republican.
Okay.
So my
Scoop my
politics,
cereal. No, it's
yeah,
all right.
my politics have not, my votes have not
so
reflected
I'm more
that.
libertarian than you.
You are.
Ooh.
You are.
You claim
are not
libertarian. I
wrong.
don't really claim libertarian. I just registered as one.
Yeah. You absolutely do. You can have the gold star.
Now I got my point.
Yes, but
Got
for
your
those
point.
keeping score at home, it's 1-1 right
There you
now. Who made me the arbiter?
You're in the middle.
Yeah. And you're the white guy.
I know, right? Yeah.
That makes
give
me
the
the
white
most
guy the vote.
conservative.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, you are the most conservative.
Thank
Yes.
you.
But so even though I am registered Republican, and on several key issues that would be my natural vote,
Yeah.
I am just skeptical of concentrating power in any one person. Maybe it's because I'm an American. I think it's because I'm a Christian. I'm skeptical of concentrating power in the hand of any one person. So any demagoguery, I am automatically opposed to.
Good word.
And I'm skeptical of concentrating power in the hands of one party.
Yeah.
Because single party states historically have not been good for civil liberties.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that liberties are the key, and those liberties are what enable a more effective evangelization, are what produce a healthier context for the church, because you're forced to then compete in the marketplace of ideas. All of those libertarian touch points. Did I hit all of them, even though I'm not registered as a libertarian?
That's why I'm going over to the multicultural ideal.
Yeah. So we'll get to the multicultural ideal, but that whole thing of, hey, hey, we're all Republicans here. Well, we're not. And I think it'd be healthier if we didn't. Even if I disagree with another political party's issues, where they stand on things, the benefit to society of multiculturalism is great enough. I would rather have diversity in leadership than I would uniformity. Because it produces a stronger thing. It's the hybrid vigor idea in agriculture. It's that whole approach just produces a better end result. A dominant culture, a unilateral culture, does not produce health. It produces stale.
All right, Richard, make sure we eventually talk about housing.
I'm writing notes about housing right now.
Because I have a question before we get there. I really do. I can't help it. But the stuff you were saying, so I had this idea.
I like housing almost as much as I like lynching.
Oh, my goodness. It's good. Aren't you glad it's the black guy saying that?
Yes.
That would sound really bad if somebody else said that. I just thought about that.
But so, okay, I have this idea, in line with what you're talking about, of I think that we need to, this is just me talking, Kamar, not even Kamar as pastor, this is just Kamar talking, of we need to be more focused on diversity as the church instead of unity.
Explain the difference.
And I'm going to explain. So I feel like part of why we have some of the issues we have in the church right now is we've been so focused on this idea of unity. We need to be united. We need to be united. And my idea is if we were more focused, if we were as focused as we are on unity as diversity, what would happen? And we've done unity at the just pretty much throwing out diversity. We want to be united. And I think, okay, what if we did the same thing with diversity? What if we said we're going to prioritize diversity over unity? Actually, like have the symbol, diversity over unity. Like, what if we prioritize that instead? Because we know what happens when we prioritize unity. We see this. We end up pretty much getting even less unity, like because we're going after the wrong thing.
It's the fundamentalist issue, right?
Yeah.
It's Carl F. H. Henry. It's fundamentalism and the issue of once you start. Because the fundamentalist movement started out with a great ideal. Let's just agree on what the gospel is. But then it was like, well, this is really important to me, so this needs to be part of that. And this is really important to me, so this needs to be part of that. And you start accreting all of these things onto what is central. And soon it's like, well, not only can you not welcome somebody to preach in your church, you can't welcome somebody to preach in your church who welcomed this person to preach in their church. And you get these degrees of separation and all of that. So I didn't mean to digress, but yes.
But I think, and I realize you're thinking like, well, but then we could go off into the left field in this other direction. And I realize there's always that fear of, well, that'll just result in another bad thing. And my response to that always is, well, we can obviously see what we're doing right now is resulting in this bad thing. And you tell me that we might end up in another ditch over there. But we are in this ditch now. And I would much rather go in a different direction and get out of the one I'm in and maybe get another one than stay in the one I'm in.
I think we're all drunk driving and we just go from ditch to ditch.
But I mean, that's my take on it. Is like I get people say, well, if we focus on diversity instead of unity, we're going to end up in another ditch. And I would say we might not. I don't know.
What's your definition of diversity? That's my
like you're talking about. Anytime it's kind of like when we walk in a room. If you walk in a room and you're the only black guy, you're like, oh,
okay.
Like just that gut feeling, like of
cultural singularity.
There's only red flowers here. Where are my yellow flowers?
Yeah. Like because diversity in our modern day vernacular has become encompassing of a lot of different things.
Yeah, well, or like looking at a garden,
diversity.
like or looking at it's. Nature tells us what it is. Like if all I see are ants and I don't see any flying insects, that's a problem. There should be something flying too. Like when you look at a movement, when you look at an organization, you look at a school, you look at anything, and if you look at you say, let's say I say, okay, I see black, brown, white, red, yellow. Okay, I see all that, but everybody drives a Mercedes and they all make $200,000 a year. You would still say, you know what? I'm missing something. Where are my poor folks at?
So you're saying the church has been united, but not ethnic diversity,
not just or economically
it's just
diverse,
not been
or
diverse.
It's just not been diverse. Period.
Okay.
It's been pursuing unity, and so much so that it said, forget diversity. We want unity. Forget diversity.
I would argue, how has it been united?
Well, I'm saying it hasn't achieved that goal either.
Well, we used to burn heretics, so that seemed to solve
we
that
were united
problem.
in that.
It's not that we've achieved unity, but we're pursuing it. And so it's not that we would achieve diversity either, but I'm saying,
so you're saying pursuing unity without diversity.
So what if we pursue diversity as like we say, diversity is what we're chasing. Right now, we're chasing unity, and we're not even achieving it. Let's chase diversity instead and see what happens.
Yeah.
You might not achieve that either.
At the risk of being accused of what I'm always accused of, which is being too down the middle, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think we need to pursue diversity over unity. Mm-hmm. I really think we're meant to pursue both.
Yeah.
Right. We take those touchstones that we see in the world and in the scripture, and we say yes to all of them.
Yeah.
And I think that I would be that person saying, hey, Kamar, yeah, you get us out of this ditch, but you're going to get us in another one if this is what we're pursuing.
I think ideally, yes, both. But practically, have you ever seen people able to do two things at once?
Yes.
I mean, not me.
Yes.
Okay.
So growing up, my grandfather he raised hay over in Central Oregon. We would go over every summer and we'd help him collect it when it was time to harvest. If we went over before, we would help him irrigate. And out there, it's all done with hand line irrigation. So you've got a line, 4-inch pipe, 3-inch pipe with sprinkler risers off of it, and you have to move them to the next set. Well, you've got a field that is half a mile long, and you've got all these pipes, and what you don't want is pipes doing this, because then you're going to miss areas. And so the best way to keep your line from doing this is not to have a reference point to the last pipe you laid. Mm-hmm. It's not to have a reference point to where you want to lay the next pipe. It's to look down in the distance and say, there's the goal. And in my grandfather's case, he had taken white 5-gallon bucket lids and baling wired them to fence posts.
Why'd it have to be white?
Yeah. Because they were not.
It's not a race thing. But he had taken those so that you could see them all the way away. And it was like, I'm lining up with that, which automatically means that the one behind it is lined up, which means that this one is lined up.
Yeah.
I think as Christians, we have that distant reference point given to us. Mm-hmm. Fixing your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of your faith. And when we pursue Jesus, we will automatically get both unity and diversity.
I agree.
Pursuing either one, we'll get neither.
I grant you that. I just don't. I very rarely encounter regular humans who are able to handle the two things at once. It's like, give me one, and you
I'm giving you one. I'm giving you Jesus.
And they say Jesus, no, because that's too many levels, and they'll say, and they say, and you've experienced. They say, I need you to break it down less than that.
So,
yes, and I will still say, look at Jesus.
And I'm simple. I think there's unity and diversity. That's just me.
I'll grant you that. I think, me optimistically, I think that if we did pursue it, we would achieve, like you said, we'd achieve the unity, because I think that because diversity is baked into God's law for the universe, I don't think there's a going off the rails on it if it's done in Christ. I don't think you can. I think unity, you can go off the rails on that, because that's not exactly a universal principle in this world. It's a principle of Christ. It's a principle in the Godhead. I
think it is a universal
but
principle.
I don't think it's a principle in the way He made this world.
I think it is. I think it is.
Okay, how?
Everything, you talk about it, everything is solar powered, right? Everything is solar powered. Now, hold on.
Not everything.
Everything is solar powered.
Not everything.
What's not solar powered?
Thermus aquaticus, which lives at the bottom of the ocean and gets all of its energy from thermal vents.
Right, which would not have those vents had it not been for a solar system developing around a star called the sun. Everything is solar powered, right? The sun is the engine driving everything about life on this planet. At some level, everything is solar powered, right? Unity is built in, but you can tap that in a diverse amount of ways. You can do it through pulling some oil out, which is simply solar energy stored. You could do coal. You could do actual solar power. You could do wind power, right? All of those things, but they're all solar powered, right? I think at the fundamental level, life is that, a fundamental unifying thing. We look at something and we say, that's alive, or that thing is not alive, right? And we may draw lines in there. I'll eat this thing that's alive. I won't eat this thing that's alive, right? Or, but all of those things still have that underlying unity. And so I think diverse unity is the organizing principle of the world. And I think that it was baked in by its creator.
All right. We'll agree to disagree on that one.
Perfect.
Yeah. Point to you, I guess.
You get a point.
Woohoo!
You get a point.
Tied.
You get a point. You all get a point.
Richard,
yes.
We need to talk about land.
Yes.
Or
Let's talk about housing.
Or not lynching.
No, not this time. No more lynching. Now only housing. So in So this is right around the New Deal. So right after it was World War II, I guess it was FDR. He created this thing called the New Deal, and he created this agency, this brand new agency called the Fair Housing Association. And this was supposed to be a great thing. It was designed that when returning soldiers from World War II came back, they could be a part of this. What was that thing they could get? They could get the GI Bill.
Yep.
The GI Bill would help them get these super low interest rates, and it would pay for some of their down payment. It was great, and it took really the American dream to a whole new level. You could be a home owner. And one of the things that was awesome about it is you had all these returning GIs that were African American as well as their white counterparts. They're all slapping high five, ticker tape parades, New York.
Houses.
We did this thing. We kicked, Nazi Germany in its butt, and now we come back. We're going to be treated like real people. The problem was the GI Bill wasn't equally accessible to African Americans.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, the Federal Housing Administration, they were a very powerful organization. Mm-hmm. They set the standards for like banking and loan mortgages, and also for how what are these things called? The appraisers and all these kind of things would do their job. So they were like super influential, still super influential, but they baked into their laws certain rules and regulations, and some of them were false realities.
Yeah.
That if African Americans went into white neighborhoods, it would lower property values. Like that was written into the code, that was written into their bylaws, all this kind of stuff. And so what it meant is it created this reality that African Americans in these loans that they could get so banks would say, well, you're in this area, you're African American, we're not going to allow you to go into these white neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You can only get a loan in this area and only for this much, because we perceive that the property value is going to be less if you moved in it. So this is where you can live. And so they had these green areas, and they had this, they would draw a green line around these great mortgage, these prime mortgage locations, and then they would write this red line around poor or bad mortgage locations, and this would be called redlining. So essentially, black folks were able to live in these certain geographical locations, and if they moved outside of that, they wouldn't get approved for these loans. Well, certain things started to happen in 1968. In 1968, that was when LBJ, he signed the Fair Housing Act, which basically said it was you couldn't discriminate based on housing, no matter what you look like. And so that was a great day. But what happened, there was this new phenomenon. We called it white flight, but there's another one called block busting. And essentially what it meant is if an African American who lived in an African-American neighborhood. And also at this time, because people didn't want to build in these redlining areas, they would build housing projects, and people would rent more to these areas. And so consequentially, you had more renters, you had more low housing, you had more public housing, things like that. And over in these other areas, you had these nice cookie cutter neighborhoods that looked like the Wonder Years and Leave It to Beaver and things like that.
I feel so uncomfortable in those kind of neighborhoods.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah.
I live in one of those neighborhoods.
I really feel uncomfortable in those neighborhoods.
That's great.
I grew up in that, and I still...
Did you?
Yeah. Orange County.
Oh.
We invented that.
I grew up next to a hog farm. So
yeah, but like,
similar.
we in Southern California pretty
Basically
much
the
invented
same
that.
Basically, yeah. So what would happen is you get one of these African Americans, and they started to save their money, started to do all this kind of good stuff, and they want to move out, and they want to go and move in one of these nice neighborhoods, because in these nice neighborhoods they had sidewalks, they had garages, they had a yard. Some of them even came with new appliances like new a dishwasher, a stove, a refrigerator, all that kind of stuff. So they wanted to move into all these new places. And so the idea is that if one African American moved into an all white neighborhood, they called it blockbusting, because and real estate agents were by and large responsible for this. You would literally have real estate agents go around to the rest of the neighborhood once they heard that an African American had moved in, and they would instill fear into the white neighbors and say that your property value is going to go low, because it's right here in the FHA guidelines that once they move here, your property value is going to go low, because who wants to live beside black people? So here's the thing. I can give you a cash deal for like 80-90% of your house's value. But if you wait to a year, half your neighbors are going to be black, and your property value is going to be less than, what it is today. It's going to be half of that. So if you take my deal today, I can let you in on this new way of getting out before you lose a lot of money. And of course, we all know that your house is one of the biggest investments you will ever have. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is these white folks are like, look, I don't want to lose money. They may not be racist. They're looking at it strictly, a lot of them, from a strictly economic perspective. I don't want to lose my value in my house more than what I already have. Let me get out of here. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is it created white flight. You had a lot of white people moving out of these neighborhoods, moving out of these areas, and then these real estate folks would buy these houses for 90% of what they were worth, and they would turn around and they would charge new African-American families a lot more than just what they just bought it for. They would charge 120% of what the value of it was. Mm-hmm. And then they would move in and would turn into an African-American neighborhood. And you actually see that. I think he talked about, there was one place, it was within 20 years, mm-hmm. I forgot where it was, within 20 years or so, there was an area that had now become basically mostly African-American.
Yeah.
And that's where we get white flight. That's where we get this term called block blessing from. And then later on, we'll talk about that later, hopefully, but this whole idea of gentrification, which is like the reverse of block busting.
I don't know about, maybe we can talk about gentrification in the next episode, because the block busting is what also leads to what we see. I'm looking at, 206 here. He's talking about, just according to the 2000 census, Hopkinsville is second only to Louisville as the most segregated city in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. What you're describing is exactly right. We have these largely segregated communities where there's the black neighborhoods, and people say, well, white people live there too. Okay, the really poor neighborhoods that are mostly minority, and then you have the not poor neighborhoods that are mostly not minority. Mm-hmm. Because yes, there are white people who live in these so-called black neighborhoods, mm-hmm. and they are the poor white people. Mm-hmm. It's like, what was the lady you came with the food to the other day? You were saying how you were asked about so-and-so, and she said, what did she say?
I don't associate with white people.
White lady answered the door. Mm-hmm. And that was her answer. Mm-hmm. Because, there are people who are like that. They live in these minority neighborhoods, and they don't associate with white folks, so they say, because they're like, no, we're in this neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so we have a very segregated community. And as a result, you have this certain neighborhoods look a certain kind of way. And he goes on towards the bottom of the page. He says, the processes of urban deterioration do not happen according to impersonal, inexorable laws. They occur through collaborative and mutually reinforcing decisions to direct public and private resources away from the central core. We're dealing with this right now in Hopkinsville. We got the Phoenix building. This is going to get torn down any day now because it's set for demolition, which is a historic part of downtown that just sat there and rotted away for 40 years.
60 years, yeah.
Yeah, at least 40 years. Because I know I've heard people tell stories about, I was at so-and-so's campaign when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And they're in their 60s now. Yeah. and they're saying, and I remember it was rotting then. So good 40, 50 years.
Where was code enforcement?
Well, that's what this is talking about, is that for so long, the way code enforcement worked, they didn't have the teeth to do, because I know some people who work in these things. So I can tell you, like, their version of the story is we can only do so much. Like, they talk about, say you got tall grass, all right? All they're allowed to do is either mow it for them and slap a fine, or slap a fine. But up until recently, there was no enforcing liens. Mm-hmm. So there was no taking property. It was that you have all these liens building up, and as long as you're showing good effort, so if you have a $100,000 bill of liens for the city, and you pay $1,000 this year, we're going to say that's good effort, and we're not going to actually execute on it. And so they're just stockpiling all these rotting away territories here in our city. Yeah. We have all this rot that's happening, and it's largely in neighborhoods where it's like, well, I don't live there, my people don't live there. They can deal with that. They can live with that. And then we have the homeless situation here in Hoptown on top of all that. So we got all these places where they can go, and then the drugs and the gangs. Like, it's compounding because you have people who are like, well, I left that neighborhood behind, and that's them over there. And they tell themselves it's because poor people don't take care of their stuff.
And these, what they call poor people, most of them don't own these homes. Yeah. Most of these are renters.
Yeah.
And I went to actually a housing meeting here in town locally last week. And one of the complaints was that, the people that live there, nothing happens when their places are in a state of ill repair. And so the process, as it was described to us, is that someone makes a complaint if they're a renter. And so they make this complaint. It goes to the city. The city is supposed to go out and verify it. If they verify it, then they can issue, I guess, a citation and then a fine.
Yeah.
And so I asked the gentleman from the city, how many fines? I said, just, ballpark figure. How many fines has the city given out over the last year in 2022? And, you would think maybe a lot. Because if you drive through some of these neighborhoods, you have neighborhoods that have, aluminum foil on the siding.
Yeah.
They're falling apart.
Oh, no. It's not a lot.
You can drive through and literally, 30, 40, 50 houses look like you could just, with one sledgehammer and a good old boy, you can knock the whole thing down.
You can knock the whole neighborhood down.
You can knock, exactly. It looks that bad. And so he said, I don't know. It'd be hard for me to, I said, ballpark figure. Is it closer to 20 or closer to 100?
Closer to 20.
He said, closer to 20.
Yeah.
So,
because what it was they didn't have manpower for code enforcement. And now I will get marginally political right now. I will. And I completely have a horse in this race because of friends of mine and people I care about. But I will say that not only have they been underfunded, their funding's being cut. The way things are being run right now in the city is that it's not going to probably get better. I know they say it's going to, but I don't have much hope for necessarily getting better as far as this side of things, because when you have less people to work with, how are you going to issue more
you
fines?
cut the teeth out of the program.
I just don't understand how that works. Generally you need more workers to get more work done.
Yeah. And so this is just me. And I've kind of talked to you guys about it. And I know we've got a long way to go before this is over. But one of the solutions to me is we need to educate the people in these areas. We need to get financial education, financial literacy, to be able to save money, to be able to get out of these kind of places. Some people call them slumlords. Maybe it's to get to a better apartment or to own your own home.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if 50% of the folks that live in these areas were able to get enough money to be able to be financially literate enough and good stewards of their finances to be able to get out of these areas and afford their own home? Because how this is owning a home. So a lot of times, and I don't know about today, but a lot of times it's cheaper to own than it is to rent.
Yeah.
And you've got one gentleman, he was renting for 14 years in our city.
Yeah.
14 years.
I would say this, and then I want to flip it over to Brandon here, and we're going to actually close this out soonish, and we'll just have to pick up some of this when we do our live one.
Yeah.
But yes, I think we need to educate them, but I feel like the education is less about housing and rent and money finances and all that stuff. And this is why I'm coming to you, Brandon. I think the education is more about educating our people about the idea of being a diverse people for Christ. Because these people are segregated, yes, but we are as if not more segregated on Sundays in our churches. And imagine if those people were sitting in the pew next to the people who owned the houses they rented.
If the slumlord and the tenant were beside each other,
they would no longer be slumlord. So, Brandon, I feel like that speaks to your heart even to a degree too, of like the solution
Absolutely.
is Jesus and the solution is the church.
Yes.
The solution is getting everybody together in the church.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that you've hit the proverbial nail on the head by saying, if you have a brother and a sister in Christ, the brother's renting from the sister in Christ, or, the sister's renting from a brother in Christ, or vice versa, however you want to draw that out. It doesn't matter race, doesn't matter anything. Sitting together, worshiping the same God, making covenant with one another, that is going to affect more than Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It has to.
Yeah.
It has to. And if it doesn't, then that is the point at which the church can step in and say, I'm not sure that your faith is real.
Yeah.
Like, it has to impact more than just Sunday morning, or it's not real faith. Now, getting there is an issue of discipleship. And you guys know it's amazing how often streams of reading and thinking and talking come together. We're reading this book, another book, Emotionally Healthy Church, right? And that whole idea of our discipleship has failed because all we've done is be like, hey, can you quote the 66 books of the Bible?
Yeah.
We don't ask content questions, and then we don't take content questions and make them application questions. And a former staff person here at Edgewood probably used to get really frustrated with me because I had a tendency to be more ivory towery, more academic. And she would look at me and say, so what?
Yeah.
Like, okay, you got this great academic ideal. And I used to get so mad at that. Like, what do you mean, so what? Like, this is great. Isn't this a great idea to discuss? But now, with the benefit of age, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, that was exactly the right question to be asking young, dumb Brandon. I don't care about your idea. Tell me how it works in the church.
Right.
And so when we talk about the economic realities of a high rental market.
Yeah.
Jesus speaks to that.
Yeah.
And the church is meant to get in there and be part of that education process,
Great.
but not divorced from Christ,
Yes.
with Christ.
Yeah.
Why, landowner, can you not have economically exploitative contracts?
Right.
Because of Jesus.
Yeah.
That's good.
Why, tenant, should you be working towards independence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of Jesus.
Or if not even that, just taking care of the property. You're not abusing this property because you're saying it's not my house. You're taking care of it and stewarding it
Yes,
well
that's
as you
right.
rent from it.
That's right.
Yes.
Because of Jesus.
Excellent
Whatever
point.
you do,
Yes.
do it as unto the Lord.
Exactly. And that's where that discipleship component comes in. And we, as pastors, have failed. And I'm putting myself firmly in the failure camp at that.
Oh, so minus 1 point for you now.
-1. Okay. You guys are now ahead. But that's that thing. Like, we've got to make our discipleship mean more than biblical knowledge.
Yeah.
It has to be life transformation, life application.
Yes. Yeah.
Because of your faith, this is how you run your business. Because of your faith, this is how you conduct your affairs.
Yes.
Because of your faith, this is how you take care of your animals. This is how you take care of your home. All of those things are wrapped up in discipleship, but we don't like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's so much easier to just meet in a classroom and have a Bible study.
I agree with 100% of what you just said. There's only one caveat, which is a lot like the teachers. A lot of the people who own these properties are not from here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's where I think part of it too is having the segregated churches, because you do have certain demographics that tend to go to different kinds of churches. So having those integrated more would break that down, teaching and preaching differently. But even like that, with having all these foreign landowners in the sense that they're not living here in Hoptown, living in Christian County, I think that would be resolved, because if the local landowners did differently, the non-local landowners would be out of business.
Capitalism would work.
They would either have to sell their properties because nobody's renting from them, or they would have to elevate the quality they give. And this goes back to the church and how we're failing as a church.
Yeah.
Is that I strongly believe that if you really, really were to boil it down, about 4% of America is actually Christian. And that's probably on a good day. When you really look at what does it really, really, truly mean to be a Christian,
When we're checking fruit, like Jesus said to do.
yeah, it's low, but that doesn't matter. If that 4% were to just be united and not be divided, man. And then if you were to gather in the other 20 some odd percent of people who claim to be and aren't, and they're just following our lead because they're just along for the ride, what would happen if you had that percentage of America who's sitting there saying, we're just going to do things right?
1 in 4 people whose economic practices, whose home ownership practices, whose business practices are influenced by Jesus to the extent that it is transformative.
Yeah.
1 in 4 people, business leaders, politicians would kill
Yeah.
for a 25% demographic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Jesus has got it.
Yeah.
How come Jesus isn't president yet?
I keep riding them in.
Keep going, man. Keep doing it.
On that, I guess we'll end this one on writing in Jesus, and we'll pick up because we got some stuff left in chapter 6. We can finish that up in our live one we're going to do.
Yeah.
So again, anybody listening, if you are in town, September 8th, Museums of Hopkinsville from 6 to 8, we were going to be there. Alyssa, thank you so much for letting us be there.
Absolutely.
Bring a friend.
Bring a friend, come ready. And I do plan on having, because I have a 4th mic. If somebody who's watching, there's a 4th one. I'll take it out of my office.
There you go.
And set it up for if somebody who said, you know what? I don't like what you said about such and such. Cool. Come
Bring
tell
it.
us to our face.
Yeah,
we can take
exactly.
it. I mean,
We
might,
dare you.
We might cry, but it's all
Double
right.
I won't cry.
I might.
I will.
I won't. I'll dry your guys' tears. How about that?
There we go.
Thanks, man.
Wait. I
Appreciate
want
it.
Jesus dry my tears.
Oh, that's a poem right there. I like that.
All right. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you,
Love
guys.
letters to Jesus.